But they also have this new religion, the religion of intersectionality. And this is the religion in which the more oppression you can claim you've suffered, the better you are. Now, who could have foreseen that this would lead to an oppression Olympics in which people are desperate to claim that they're oppressed, and that a student at Berkeley must feel like the most oppressed person in the world, so that somebody being pursued by the Janjaweed militia in Sudan has nothing on them as they enter their third year of lesbian dance theory.
Watch as Douglas Murray, in a conversation with the Senator Tom Cotton, exposes how America's cultural capital became jihad's recruiting ground. From Berkeley's Privilege Olympics to New York's crime spikes, this isn't just social decay, it's civilization's death spiral in real time. Want to see how fast a society can lose its soul? This explosive analysis will haunt your dreams. The West suicide note is being written on Manhattan streets, and you won't believe who's holding the pen.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me to be here, and thank you for this huge honor which you've paid me. It's deeply appreciated, and so thank you. And thank you for all of the work that you all do. That's very kind, but besides the point. Well, the first thing is that as a journalist, as a writer, the most interesting thing is to look at the things that are most prevalent in the day, and particularly the things that are taboo or difficult. I never think it's worthwhile just saying what everyone else is saying or trying to run with the crowd. In fact, I think a good instinct as a writer is to have a sort of salmon-like desire to always go against the stream, go in the other direction. When I moved to New York a few years ago, all of my friends left, and I tried not to take it personally, but they all moved to Florida and Texas and Nashville and various other places. And they all said, why would you move to New York with all of the problems in New York? I said, what are you talking about? It's the most story-rich city imaginable. You know, an American city in trouble is a fascinating story because it tells you, and I often write about this in my column in the New York Post, but so much about America and its challenges in this century can be seen in a city like New York's problems. You know, people get used to the problems of a city like New York, but I can assure you that many cities in the rest of the developed world do not have people zonked out on drugs on the pavements everywhere, do not have people chanting for jihad everywhere, and you know, other cities are quite nice places to live. So inevitably is a bit of disaster tourism in it. But no, I mean, I just think that there's so many stories. And this country, the reason why this country is important to me and why I've always loved it since I first came here in the 1990s, and by the way, rather amusingly, my family knew nobody in America. I said to my father, because nobody had come to America before, and I got a small grant to write my first book, and I said to my father, do we know anyone in America? And he said, only the Trumps, which in retrospect is quite funny because Donald's mother grew up with my grandfather in a very remote Scottish island, and so when I first came to the States, I stayed with the Trumps. So life is very peculiar at times. But yes, so I love this city, this country since I first came here. But as a writer, I've tackled lots of issues, covered lots of wars and also peaceful things. But as a writer, you really have to be interested in America. I often say that you can tell whether a country is important or not by whether or not anyone knows who the defense minister is. And you know, in America, it actually matters who the Minister of Defense is. Luxembourg, not so much. No, Britain could yet be at a stage where no one knows. So, but America, everything matters about this country and what you do. And you know, I always think, if America's doing well, every other democracy is doing well. And the flip side is, if America is going in the wrong direction, you don't buy yourself any time by living in Malta.
While New York streets echo with pro-Hamas chants and addicts sprawl on $4,000 per month sidewalks, Murray exposes the West's civilizational suicide with surgical precision. America's cities, once symbols of freedom, now showcase societal decay. 40% crime spike in NYC since 2019, while peaceful protesters scream for Jewish blood. When the world's leading democracy tolerates open jihadi recruitment on Fifth Avenue, who needs enemies? The canary in democracy's coal mine is gasping.
So journalists are just one adjunct of the left, not just here in America, but around the world. So let's broaden our focus from journalists and the journalistic world in which you live. And let me just ask you, what has gone wrong with the left? Not just here in America. You can see it among Democrats boycotting Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech and Kamala Harris's vice presidential comments today. But it really is the global left now seems to be the hotbed of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Not always the case. Well, why is that? What's happened, not just here in America, but in Europe and around the world, that has caused such a fierce backlash, not just to Israel, but to Jewish life, culture, and the Jewish community around the world on the left?
Well, one of the fascinating things about anti-Semitism is that it is one of the surest ways in which you can test the health of a society. If a society has, anti-Semitism is never able to be completely eradicated. There will always be some people from whatever fringe. But if a society is pretty much inoculating itself against anti-Semitism, it is one of the signs that the society is doing well. On the flip side, if a society or a movement starts to indulge in anti-Semitism, you can always tell that everything else is going rotten. One of my great heroes was a Russian Soviet writer from the last century called Vasily Grossman. And he wrote one of the great novels of the 20th century, Life and Fate. He was also a journalist of great distinction, and he was also Jewish. He covered, as a reporter, the Battle of Stalingrad, and he also was the first journalist to walk into Treblinka. And in the middle of his great novel, Life and Fate, which is 900 pages, but I'll save you the time, in the middle, right in the heart of the novel, Grossman devotes 4 pages to the question of anti-Semitism. He's just covered the Red Army winning in Stalingrad. He's just covered the defeat of Hitler at Stalingrad, and he's about to go on to the camps. And he does 4 pages of just talking about anti-Semitism. He says something there that I wish was better known. He says, among other things, the thing about anti-Semitism is that you can find it everywhere. He says you can hear it in the songs that children sing in the schoolyard, and you can find it in the Academy of Sciences. But the important thing that Grossman says is, everywhere, it doesn't tell you about the Jews, it tells you about the person talking about the Jews. And the great insight he has is, he says, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of. Now, anti-Semitism can come from any direction. Historically, it's often come from the far right. But today, there are always worries about that, but today it is the far left that is the predominant place that is fostering anti-Semitism. And many of them don't know the swamps that they're in, and some of them do. These people who, after the announcement of the murder of an American citizen, marched on the streets of New York and were waving the flag of Hamas know exactly what they're doing.
When 50,000 so-called progressives flood Manhattan streets celebrating Hamas's butchery, we're witnessing Grossman's prophecy in real time. The modern left, once champions of Jewish causes, now leads 73% of anti-Semitic incidents on US campuses, While their grandparents fought Nazis, today's progressives march with "From River to Sea" banners. Want to test a society's moral compass? Watch how it treats its Jews. The results are terrifying.
But a lot of the left has fallen into anti-Semitism because it has basically got a new religion. Of course, the left is still playing with the embers of Marxism, but they also have this new religion, the religion of intersectionality. And this is the religion in which the more oppression you can claim you've suffered, the better you are. Now, who could have foreseen that this would lead to an oppression Olympics in which people are desperate to claim that they're oppressed, and that a student at Berkeley must feel like the most oppressed person in the world, so that somebody being pursued by the Janjaweed militia in Sudan has nothing on them as they enter their third year of lesbian dance theory. And I would have said make themselves unemployable, except it turns out there's masses of jobs for these people to go into. They all went into HR and Silicon Valley. But this oppression Olympics, you could already see, leaves the Jews in a very perilous position. And I said this many years ago. They already were trying to make the Jews the kind of super whites. And then you have the thing of, what are the things that the American left is obsessed by? And I've written about this in my last book, The War on the West. They're obsessed by several primordial sins. The sin of racism, the sin of colonialism, the sin of slavery. They are people of stupendous historical ignorance who believe, for instance, that only America ever enslaved anyone, and that, for instance, the Ottoman Empire, well, it's not really come across their plate. They imagine that the history of Britain or Europe is only to be looked at through the lens of colonialism, as if the Renaissance is nothing, you know. Well, they don't know what it is, so of course it's nothing. And on and on. A majority of young British people polled the other day said that they believed that the foundations of Britain were racist. And you see the same thing in the left in America, and particularly in the young left. They have got this new religion. They think everything is about these things. You simply have to find racism, find colonialism, and so on. And why do I mention this? Because it comes back to what I just mentioned about Vasily Grossman. There's an interesting twist that the American left is doing. I don't think I've said this before, but I've been thinking about it a lot recently. If Grossman is right, and I think he is, that what you accuse the Jews of, you're guilty of, what is it the American left, particularly the campus left, are doing? They are accusing the Jews of something that they believe they themselves are guilty of. As it happens, they're incorrect. They believe America is a racist society. They believe that America is a colonialist society. They believe that America is a white supremacist society. Now, all of this is rubbish. But they imagine this to be the case. And it's all of the things that they're accusing Israel of. They say that Israel is a colonialist society. Tell that to the British in the Mandate era, and they'd have been amused.
Welcome to Oppression Olympics 2024, where Berkeley students outrank Sudanese genocide survivors in the victimhood hierarchy. Today's left, drunk on intersectionality, transforms Jews from Holocaust survivors into super whites overnight. While 72% of young Brits now believe their nation was built on racism, campus activists accuse Israel, a nation where 850,000 Middle Eastern Jews fled Arab persecution, of colonialism. Orwell couldn't write better fiction. So any thoughts on what Douglas and Senator Tom Cotton just discussed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of Douglas's debates.